Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. In celebration of the new year and my first full year on YouTube, I wanted to go back in time and take a look at some of the photos we took this year. But not only just to look back, but also see how far we've come along the way. And make sure to stick around to the end where I'll show you a few tips to improve your photography for 2025. I hope you all enjoy. Now, not only was this my first full year on YouTube, this was also my very first calendar year as a landscape photographer. So I appreciate all of the support and criticism that I've gotten throughout this year. And I can't believe we've almost hit 5,000 subscribers already on this YouTube channel. I cannot wait to see where this goes. But jumping right in, this first image really catapulted my motivation for this YouTube channel as it was my first ever vlog, and that is this photo from Yosemite National Park. Now, this was my first vlog, first ever time in Yosemite, and the first time that I used the Sony 100-400. And if you've kept up with the channel at all, you'll know that has become one of my go-to camera lenses for all kinds of photography. But this image is super special to me because it was a bucket list shot for when I went to the park. I saw it was bluebird skies the entire week I was going to be there, and so I set up at Tunnel View one of the days for hours on hours, and finally a rainbow spectrum appeared in the falls. Now, it's not the most unique perspective of Yosemite, but we have some more of those later. The second image is also from that same exact trip, and actually it may have been from the same day, I can't exactly remember, but it was a sunset once again from Tunnel View of the tippity top of El Cap. Now, there may not have been a ton of clouds while I was there. Using that 100-400 to zoom in and capture those details around the park was amazing. And funny enough, I actually visited the park back in June of this year as well, and spent a couple sunsets at Tunnel View trying to capture similar images just to see how it changes throughout the year. And because of the sun's position when it was setting, it actually didn't create this beautiful light on El Cap. It was actually more off to the side and it didn't light up as much. So it was really special to be able to capture that when I did. Now, moving away from Yosemite, not only was this my first ever year on YouTube, my first calendar year as a landscape photographer, but it was also my first year living out in the PNW. So I got to capture some incredible images I never got to before, including this image, which is a little bit more abstract, but I really love how this turned out. Once again, I was using the Sigma 100-400 to zoom in and isolate that almost dragon eye droplet split between the two leaves. Now, this was from another vlog of mine, and I love the symmetry with the raindrops along the leaves. I went to this spot the day before I actually captured this image to this beautiful waterfall, but I didn't really take the time to look at my surroundings. I think that's really important, so I was able to capture this one. Speaking of waterfalls, one of my favorite waterfalls in the entire state of Oregon, Abika Falls, is where I captured this next image. Now, with the flowers and the color and then how rushing the water was that day, it was an absolutely amazing experience. Now, you'll notice that most of the images, including this one, are from vlogs on my channel. So if you wanted to check out more of the collections of photos that I take, you can check out all of those vlogs. I've been really happy with how they turned out, and they're super fun to make. So I hope you all enjoy it. But heading back to this image, I love the central composition of this vertical image, with the flowers almost stepstoning your eye through the scene. Now, coming back to more of a local spot to where I am now, this was actually captured about 15 minutes away from where I live. I love how the branches of this tree spiral out. I also love how the hole and the structure of the tree trunk really just demands your attention and allows you to be encapsulated in the scene. Now, for this one was pretty special. This was another one where I really heavily relied on an app called Photo Pills. Now, earlier that day, I was scouting out for different compositions, just seeing what I could find locally in that park, and I found this tree and found a composition that I really liked, and this ended up being that photo. However, during that day, the sun was a little bit off to the left of the tree, from the composition standpoint, and it was shining through the leaves and kind of casting nasty shadows onto the trunk and the leaves of the tree. So I used the app called Photo Pills to see where the sun was going to be so I can try to line it up perfectly with the middle of that tree trunk. And so I came back a couple hours later after wandering around and taking some more photos around the park and came up with this one. So again, this was another photo that was just really important to me and super awesome to capture just 15 minutes away. It required some planning and some improvisation, but it all worked out in the end. Now, taking a trip to another Oregon waterfall, this may top Abika Falls in my list of waterfalls. These next two are from Ramon Falls up in the Mount Hood Wilderness area. Again, if you want to see more from this collection, I do have a vlog from Ramon Falls as well. But these photos were so awesome to take. The funniest part, at the time of the recording of that vlog and taking these images, I didn't have any sort of ND filter. So what I had to do was take two polarizing filters, different sizes, stack them on each other and hold them in front of my lens in order to get that long exposure effect. I even mentioned in the video how my settings are a little bit weird and that technique that I used. It was pretty interesting. I love how the light is casting on the falls and the flowing nature of the water, and then also just to capture that beautiful rainbow spectrum in the water was so incredible. That was definitely a spot where I spent hours and hours waiting for the light to change, basically from sun up to sundown, just to capture as many photos as I can, trying different techniques and compositions to see what I really liked. As I mentioned, let's head back to Yosemite, but take a look at a more unique spot than Tunnel View. This photo was taken on Tioga Road in June of 2024. More bluebird kind of low cloud skies, but still was able to capture something I was really happy with. So when I was in the park for the first time in March, obviously Tioga Road wasn't open yet for the season, so that was definitely one place I wanted to hit while I was up in June. Now for that trip, I was more focused on hiking and being outdoors rather than specifically trying to capture images. So there were some times where I just kind of had to improvise with what situations I was given and couldn't just rely on beautiful light or staying at places for a long period of time. So when I pulled over at a pull-off and started looking around at these almost desert-looking trees growing out of the granite, I really loved how the leading lines in the crack of the granite just led straight up into that tree. Now, I will be honest about this one is that I did a bit more cloning or generative fill than I normally like doing in my images, but I feel like the people and that random branch sticking out of the tree in the original shot really didn't add anything. And also just remember that it's your photos and you can kind of do whatever you want. But that is just something that I felt like really enhanced the composition, made it cleaner. And honestly, if the people weren't there, it would have pretty much looked the same. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, heading away from the West Coast a little bit, I took a trip from Utah down into Colorado and was able to explore Rocky Mountain National Park for the first time. And I was so lucky to capture this image of Dream Lake inside the park. It's a fairly easy hike, and this was my first time at the lake. The bugs were kind of getting bad and the low clouds started rolling in, and I was actually just about to pack up and get ready to go because the sun was basically already down and these stormy clouds started rolling in, and I just saw some color coming over the horizon behind the mountain. And then all of a sudden, for 5 to 7 minutes, the sky exploded. It was like fire in the sky. It was so awesome to see. And just being in that beautiful spot with the reflection in the water was so cool. It was definitely a special moment and my first ever time in the park. So I definitely got a little bit lucky with that one. Now this next one, as always, has a little bit of a story to go with it. If you watched my vlog at Mount Shasta, you'd get a little bit more information about it. But long story short, a couple days before I went down to Mount Shasta from Oregon, there were beautiful wildflowers and the weather was perfect. So I rushed down there a couple days later. I spent the night in my car ready to get up and go shoot some wildflowers for sunrise. And I couldn't even make it to the spot I wanted to because they just got feet of snow while I was there. It was kind of disappointing at first, but as the sun kind of came up over the horizon, it started casting beautiful light down onto the mountain, and I was able to catch some wind and snow coming off of the trees and being lit up by the sunrise. So this next image was actually from my vlog up in the Canadian Rockies. This one was captured on the Icefields Parkway between Banff and Jasper National Park. I had taken a glacial ride tour. I can't remember exactly what it's called. You go on the glacier with this big vehicle and it's really fun, and got done with the tour and I was like, well, it's beautiful out here, let's just drive around and see what we can find. So I found this pull off with this beautiful stream running through the parkway right by the glacier tours where they ended. I rushed down there as the sun was kind of setting and captured probably one of my favorite images I've ever taken. Beautiful peaks, the light was shining right on the atmosphere in the mountains. The color of the water is just unexplainable. It's almost like a silver. It's just one of those things that you can't explain, but when you see it in person, you know exactly what you're talking about. So I brought out the color of it a little bit in this image, but it really truly is like an aqua or silver color in person, and it was just amazing. The weather was perfect, and actually my main wide angle lens broke right before this photo, and so I had to pull out the Rokinon 12mm f2 lens, which is about an 18mm full frame equivalent, and it did a great job. Fully manual lens, but I was on a tripod and ready to go. It was a super incredible moment to witness. So these next couple are also from the Canadian Rockies from September. Last year I had gone up to Banff and did a lot more hiking, and it was beautiful weather for being outside and hiking, but it was incredibly busy and kind of hot. Going in September was completely the opposite. We didn't do as much hiking because the weather was just so dramatic. There was atmosphere in the peaks and there were beautiful sunrises and sunsets. It was awesome to see. And this one at Lake Louise was no different. If you watch my vlog from Banff, you'll know that the whole point of the vlog was coming up with unique compositions in a super famous landscape. So Lake Louise had some pots of these beautiful yellow flowers planted along the shoreline, and it was just before sunset, and I was kind of hand holding my wide angle lens going around whether I wanted like a reflection shot with the cabin or the boat rental place, or if I wanted the mountains, or what I kind of wanted to do. And I found this composition and it ended up being one of my favorites from the trip. And one thing that I noticed, and the reason I picked this frame in particular from the sunset, is because the flowers on the right hand side I feel like almost mimic the cloud formation on the right hand side there. And it was just an incredible sunset. Again, the weather was awesome, so it was one of those nights that you can just sit there, enjoy. I had a remote shutter on my camera so I could just watch the sunset and click the shutter when I could. It was awesome. Now this next shot isn't nearly as unique. In fact, it might be the most taken photo out of any one of my photos that I've ever taken, and that is of Moraine Lake in Banff National Park. Now the reason I included this is because this was my second time to the park and my second time ever seeing Moraine Lake. I hadn't seen it for over a year. It was one of my favorite places I had ever been, and this was actually taken just after sunrise, and we had gotten there well before sunrise and just waited, and the clouds would roll over the mountains and then they would kind of go away and then they would roll over the mountains, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere the clouds kind of dissipated around the peaks and this fog kind of rolled in on the bottom end between the lake and the mountains. And just before people started getting onto the water and ruining that reflection, we got up to the rock pile and took this photo. And it was actually taken on my birthday, and so it was kind of a special moment for me to witness that with the sunrise and that atmosphere with a fresh coating of snow. And it's just definitely one of my favorite photos I took this year. These next two images are images that I will probably never capture again in my entire life. Between the nights of October 10th and October 11th of this year was the most incredible aurora storm in at least my existence. It was such an incredible moment. I actually worked that day, and I'm about a 3.5 hour drive from Crater Lake. So I got off of work and I rushed down to Crater Lake, and these two images were ones that I really, really wanted to get. And the weekend before this happened, I rushed down to Crater Lake expecting to be incredible auroras, because that's what it was predicting, and nothing happened. And I was in the process that week of editing a video saying, not everything happens all the time, and sometimes you just got to get lucky, but it's okay, and you just got to do what you want. And there was another solar flare that exploded and was coming straight towards Earth. So I worked that day, but I was like, I can't miss this. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I got off of work, rushed down to Crater Lake, and it was just one of the most incredible photographic experiences of my entire life. I mean, it was such an incredible night, and I got some of my favorite images I had taken this year. I mean, it was just crazy. I was lost for words for those two images. It was incredible. But these last two images are actually more recent than the previous images. And this next one was actually taken just a couple of weeks ago at Cape Kiwanda State Park. And this one, again, was just before sunrise. The sun was coming up behind us, and we looked back and the color was exploding. We were expecting an incredible sunset over Haystack Rock, but right before the color came to the clouds, which it never did, a rainbow appeared over the ocean. So I kind of shifted my composition a little bit and captured this one. Now, this last image was right here, again, like 15 minutes away from where I live now. A couple weeks ago, there was countrywide weather inversions where there was just fog for days on end. I mean, here we didn't even see the sun for 2 weeks straight. It was just foggy all the time. I loved it as a photographer. I got some woodland photography, and then I hiked up to just this butte. It's a fairly simple hike, and it's the tallest peak in kind of the surrounding area because I'm in the valley. So I went up onto this butte and got above the clouds and just saw fire all around in the clouds. The sunset just lit up the fog underneath me, and it was like I was floating in the clouds. It was just incredible. So I captured this one, a little bit more abstract, but I think it really just captures that feeling that I had while I was up there. So I hope you all enjoyed looking back at these photos as much as I did, and learned a couple of things along the way. I have so many things planned for this year, and I cannot wait to share them with you, including possibly my biggest trip yet. So if you didn't already know, I started a Discord server for the entire community to come together, share photos, and give feedback, and then at the end of every month, I'll be selecting one of your photos as a monthly contest winner. Other than that, if you could subscribe to my newsletter for all sorts of updates, and then for vlog, blog, and other video updates, if you can like and follow my Facebook page. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.